A young couple vanished right after their 1985 wedding, disappearing along with their brand new yellow Ford Thunderbird. For more than a decade, it looked as though they'd simply driven into oblivion, until a group of university researchers poring over old satellite photos spotted something strange deep in the Everglades. What they found set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. Morning light stretched across the Walmart parking lot in Homestead, Florida, as 56-year-old Linda Carroll steered her cart through the produce aisle, inspecting tomatoes and lettuce the way habit filled the quiet spaces her daughter's absence had left. Since that summer day in 1985, routine had become her anchor. The sudden ring of her cell phone, a novelty she'd only owned since winning a store lottery earlier that year, startled her so much she nearly dropped a bag of oranges. "Hello? Mrs. Carroll, this is Detective Jason Pram with the Homestead Police Department. Where are you right now?" Her pulse jumped. Over 12 years she'd fielded countless dead-end calls, but something in his voice felt different. "I'm at Walmart, buying groceries." "Why? What's happened?" "Ma'am, we need you to come to Everglades National Park. Your daughter Melissa and her husband Brandon's car has been located. We've already notified the Whitmore family as well. Could you meet us at the main parking lot on Park Road?" The words slammed into her. The phone nearly slipped from her hand. "You found the car? After all this time?" Her voice cracked. "Yes, ma'am. We need you to confirm the identification." Linda abandoned her half-filled cart and hurried to her aging Honda Civic. The 20-minute drive felt both endless and impossibly short, as memories she'd tried to set aside came rushing back. Police had once insisted Melissa had run off with Brandon voluntarily. Linda never believed it, yet 12 years of silence had worn her resolve thin. Now, that fragile acceptance crumbled. The Everglades parking lot was a blur of flashing red and blue lights. Rangers directed traffic while officers stretched yellow tape across sections of asphalt. Linda parked and stepped out on trembling legs, drawn toward a flatbed trailer at the center of the commotion. There it was, the yellow Thunderbird, water still dripping from its frame, algae clinging to once gleaming paint, windows clouded with silt. Even after 12 years underwater, she knew the car instantly. Brandon's father, Gregory Whitmore, had made a grand show of presenting it to the newlyweds, insisting on photos with the smiling couple beside it. Detective Pram, early 40s, face lined by hard experience, approached. "Mrs. Carroll, before we explain more, I'd like you to meet the people who found it." A small group of students in University of Miami shirts stepped forward. One, a sandy-haired young man with earnest eyes, introduced himself. "I'm Jake Morrison. We're environmental studies majors mapping land change patterns in the Everglades. While comparing satellite images from 1985, we noticed an odd yellow shape in the water." He opened a folder and showed her a grainy printout. After enhancing the image, we realized it was a vehicle. Our professor remembered the old missing persons case and urged us to alert authorities. We calculated the coordinates, and the park dive team pulled this up yesterday. Detective Pram nodded. "The recovery opens new possibilities, Mrs. Carroll. We'll process the car and pursue every lead." Linda stared at the mud-streaked Thunderbird, hope and dread colliding inside her. For the first time in 12 long years, answers felt within reach, though she couldn't guess what truth might surface next. They'd found it in a stretch of the Everglades so remote, it had managed to stay hidden for over a decade. The water there was deep, deep enough for a car to vanish entirely, slowly sinking and settling into the silt. "It took nearly 4 hours to recover," Detective Pram explained. "Florida Fish and Wildlife worked alongside our marine recovery team. We used sonar to pinpoint the car's exact location, then brought in divers to confirm. A police boat navigated to the site, and we airlifted it out with a helicopter. That's how we got it onto the flatbed." Linda heard the sound of car doors behind her. She turned and immediately recognized the Whitmores. Gregory was out front with his usual self-importance, Eleanor just behind him, composed as ever, and Daniel trailing, quieter than she remembered. Time had changed them, but not so much that she didn't know them on sight. A surge of old resentment rose in her chest. She remembered the last time they'd spoken, Gregory's condescending remarks, his certainty that her daughter had somehow dragged his son down, like love could be reduced to a matter of status. Detective Pram moved away to brief the Whitmores, and Linda watched as Gregory approached the car. His jaw tightened, but recognition flickered across his face. "Yes," he said aloud. "That's the Thunderbird I gave Brandon as a wedding gift. The license plate, FTB 1985. I paid extra to get that custom." Despite herself, Linda stepped forward. "What did you find inside?" The detective's face grew more serious. There were no remains, no blood, no clear evidence of a struggle, but water damage can erase a lot over time. "We did find one item." He motioned to an officer who handed him a sealed evidence bag containing a silver lighter. Gregory reached into his pocket and pulled out an identical one. "This is mine. We bought them as a pair, Christmas '84. That one belonged to Brandon." Even Eleanor's composure slipped slightly. "Detective, if they weren't in the car, where are they? What does this mean?" "I don't believe they abandoned that car on purpose," he said. "Especially not a gift with so much meaning. Someone put that vehicle there to hide it. That changes everything. This could be a criminal case now." Eleanor gasped, a hand to her throat. "You think someone hurt them?" "We're exploring all options," Pram said carefully. "But whoever did this knew the area, knew where the water was deep, and how to access it without being seen. That kind of knowledge suggests someone local." Gregory's face reddened. "Before you go wasting taxpayer money on theories, get your divers back in the water. There might still be something down there." "Our teams are actively searching, Mr. Whitmore. We'll expand the grid as needed." Gregory turned to Daniel, lowering his voice just enough to still be overheard. "This is what happens when you marry beneath you. Poor girls drag you down, or worse." "Dad!" Daniel protested, clearly stunned. "You know how much Brandon loved Melissa. Don't do this." That was too much for Linda. "Are you still blaming my daughter?" she snapped. "After everything?" Gregory whirled toward her. She could have had connections, old flames, people from her neighborhood who got jealous. Maybe they wanted Brandon out of the picture. "Jealous?" Linda's voice rose. "If Melissa wanted your son's money, she wouldn't have vanished with him. She'd have stayed and collected." "Don't you dare!" He stepped toward her. "Your daughter pulled him away from his values. She didn't respect tradition." Linda cut him off, furious. "She made a promise to wait until marriage, and your son pushed her past that. That's why they rushed into a wedding. She was only 24. Voices escalated. Tourists and bystanders paused to watch. Officers quickly moved to separate the families. "That's enough!" Detective Pram's voice sliced through the chaos. "This helps no one. You're both grieving. I get it. But this isn't how we find truth." He gently guided Linda aside. "Mrs. Carroll, I know it's hard. He's provoking you, but I promise we're going to do this right." "He's calling my daughter a criminal," Linda said, shaking with fury and pain. "She sang in the church choir. She served at the food bank. She was good." "I believe that, and we'll go through every detail, I assure you," he replied. "But for now, I think it's best if you go home and try to rest. We'll be in touch the moment we know more. Do you need someone to drive you?" Linda steadied her breathing, trying to get a grip. "No, I can manage. Just need a moment." She walked back to her car, legs heavy, and sank into the driver's seat. Through the windshield, she watched the Whitmores standing near the flatbed, Gregory gesturing animatedly, already trying to shape the narrative. Stepped inside the Whitmore estate, the cool air and polished floors a stark contrast to her own modest home. The smell of lemon polish hung in the air, Daniel led her down a quiet hallway. "We hadn't touched Brandon's room in years," he said. "But after this morning, my mom asked me to help her look through it. And we found something." The door creaked open to reveal a neatly kept bedroom frozen in time. The furniture was pristine, the bed still made, a row of trophies on a shelf near the window. Daniel crossed to the desk and picked up a small, leather-bound journal. This was tucked in the back of his drawer. "My mom doesn't want the police here just yet, not until we understand what we're looking at. But I think you should see this." He handed the journal to Linda. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside were entries in Brandon's handwriting, notes from the months before the wedding. Some were filled with excitement about the future, about Melissa, about their plans. But then came a shift. A page with a date just a few weeks before they disappeared. "She got another call. She won't say from who. Keeps saying she'll handle it. But I can see the fear in her eyes. I wish she'd trust me. I think we're in over our heads." Linda's heart pounded. "Who was calling her?" she whispered. Daniel looked away. "We don't know, but there's more." He flipped to a page near the end. The entry was shorter. "We're leaving early, not telling anyone. Melissa says it's the only way. She's packing light. Says if we go to the Keys, they'll never find us. I hope she's wrong about what she thinks is coming." Linda's knees nearly gave out. She was running from someone. "Seems like it," Daniel said quietly. "And not just with Brandon. Someone or something was scaring her enough to leave everything behind." Linda closed the journal, her hands still shaking. "I need to give this to the detective," she said. Daniel nodded. "I think that's the right call. And I'm sorry about what my dad said, about everything. Brandon loved Melissa. I know that. And I never believed she had anything to do with what happened. Neither did Mom." The words hit her unexpectedly hard. After 12 years of suspicion, blame, and silence, it was the first moment of clarity she'd had from the Whitmore family. "I appreciate that," she said softly. As Linda stepped out of the Whitmore estate and into the hot Florida sun, the box of Brandon's belongings felt lighter in her arms. There were still more questions than answers. But now, at last, she wasn't the only one asking them. Officer Martinez looked up from the evidence log, his expression professional but clearly intrigued. "At the very least, we can examine the card for fingerprints or trace DNA. There may be something that helps identify this Otis. And if this item was hidden, as you say, that could indicate someone wanted to keep it secret. That raises questions." Linda folded her arms, still clutching the smaller box of Melissa's items. It wasn't just secret. It felt wrong. Whoever gave that to her had no business doing so. And if Brandon found it, why wouldn't he say anything? Martinez nodded. "We'll look at every possibility. If there are prints or trace material, our forensics team will do what they can. And if this Otis person has a criminal record or connection to either Melissa or Brandon, we'll find it." Gregory remained near the door, arms crossed tightly, as though the entire process was beneath him. Daniel stepped forward. "We'd also like to file an official statement about how the item was found, in case it becomes relevant later." "Absolutely," Martinez replied. "I'll walk you through the process." He gestured toward an interview room down the hall. As Daniel followed the officer, Linda turned back to Gregory. His eyes were cold, jaw clenched. "Don't twist this," he warned in a low voice. "Whatever this is, it doesn't prove anything." "No," Linda said calmly. "But it might help us understand what happened to our children, if that matters to you." Gregory didn't respond. He just looked away. A few minutes later, Linda sat in the waiting area, hands folded in her lap, staring at the evidence desk where the velvet box now sat, tagged and sealed. Despite the chilled air conditioning, a bead of sweat traced down her spine. The card, the gift, the name, Otis, all swirled in her mind like puzzle pieces that refused to fit. And yet, deep inside, she knew this discovery mattered. It might not give her the full truth, Not yet, but it cracked open a sealed door, one that had remained shut for 12 long years. Ray stood near the iron gate, speaking to a man Linda didn't recognize. Early 30s, lean, sharply dressed in a way that didn't quite match the neighborhood's domestic staff or delivery types. His body language was confident, maybe too confident, like someone used to being in control of conversations. Linda kept her posture casual, repositioning the box as she watched from the corner of her eye. She couldn't make out much of their conversation, but the tone was hushed, familiar, maybe even tense. The younger man handed something small to Ray, a flash of silver. Ray accepted it without hesitation, pocketing the item and glancing quickly toward the house. When his eyes swept across the driveway, Linda ducked slightly, closing the trunk with deliberate slowness. She wasn't sure what she'd just seen, but her instincts buzzed with unease. The younger man turned and walked briskly away, slipping into a dark SUV parked just beyond the gated entry. No markings, no plates she could make out. The vehicle rolled away smoothly, disappearing down the tree-lined street. Linda walked around to the driver's side, but paused again, her hand resting on the door handle. Something wasn't right. Why would Ray, a longtime employee of the Whitmores, be accepting discreet deliveries at the gate from strangers? And more importantly, why was he retrieving Gregory's Mercedes when Gregory had already driven off with Daniel's BMW? She turned to glance back at the house, now silent again. The sense of unease deepened. That key, she thought suddenly. The one Gregory dropped in the parking lot. The one with the faint letter O and his frantic reaction when he grabbed it back. Office storage, he'd claimed. But maybe it was something else. Linda slid into her seat and closed the door. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her phone. She didn't know what it all meant yet, but something told her the name Otis, the velvet box, the key, and now this mysterious visitor were all threads of the same knot, and she intended to untie it, no matter how tightly it had been pulled for the past 12 years. Gregory's voice rang sharp in the stillness. He wasn't angry, he was commanding. The younger man, Otis, hesitated, glancing nervously at the surrounding trees, as if expecting someone to leap from the shadows. "Right, here," Otis finally said, pointing to a patch of uneven ground between two jagged limestone slabs. The soil there looked recently disturbed, lighter in color, broken in texture. Linda froze, crouched behind a boulder, hardly daring to breathe. Gregory stepped forward and examined the area, crouching down with surprising agility for a man of his age. He pulled a small notepad from his jacket, scribbled something quickly, then tucked it back into his pocket. "Don't come back here again unless I tell you," Gregory said without looking up. "But what if someone—" "I said don't," Gregory snapped. "That necklace was careless. If I see it again, you're out. And if you talk even once, you'll regret it. You know what's at stake." Otis nodded rapidly, looking like a reprimanded schoolboy. "Got it. Got it. I'm sorry. I just thought—" "You don't think. You listen. That's why I keep you around." Linda's stomach churned. What was this? What was buried, or had been buried, beneath that soil? Was this where the Thunderbird had been hidden before sinking deeper into the marsh? Or was it something worse? Something human? Gregory stood up, brushing dirt from his palms. "We're done here. Let's move." Otis looked relieved to be leaving, quickly turning back toward the path. Gregory followed, pausing only once to glance over his shoulder toward the clearing. Linda ducked lower behind the brush, barely daring to move until their footsteps faded into the undergrowth. Her heart hammered in her chest. He's hiding something. Not just old anger or guilt. This was different. This was calculated, controlled. And the way Otis had obeyed, afraid but loyal, suggested a dynamic that went far deeper than anything the police knew about. She stayed still for a while, waiting, then crept forward. The clearing felt heavy, as if the air itself held its breath. She approached the spot Otis had pointed to. The ground was definitely disturbed. Not recently, but not decades old either. Maybe months, maybe less. There were no markers, no signs of official digging, but Linda could feel it in her bones. Something had been placed here, hidden. She pulled out her phone, snapped a few discrete photos of the clearing, the surrounding boulders, the unique shape of the ridge. Then she dropped a pine cone near the edge of the disturbed ground, a simple marker. Something she could use to find this exact spot again. Then she turned and followed the trail back, legs shaky but mind racing. Whatever was buried out there, Gregory knew about it, and she wasn't going to let it stay hidden. Off to the side, arms crossed, his expression a calculated mask of confusion and annoyance, but Linda could see it clearly now. The tension in his jaw, the twitch of his fingers, the way he kept scanning the scene like a man trying to maintain control in a world rapidly slipping from his grip. Detective Pram spotted her immediately and jogged over, his eyes scanning her face for injuries. "Mrs. Carroll, are you all right?" Linda nodded, though her legs felt like rubber and her throat burned with held-back sobs. "I heard everything. I got it all. The threat, the bribe, the location." She pointed toward the direction she had come from. "Melissa's body is buried out there, on a limestone ridge near Long Pine Key." Otis showed Gregory the exact spot. Pram didn't hesitate. He waved over 2 officers and spoke quickly into his radio, dispatching a forensics team and search crew. "We'll secure the area and start digging immediately. You've done something extraordinary today. Risky, but extraordinary." Linda's eyes were drawn again to Otis. His head hung low, hands cuffed behind his back. He didn't look dangerous anymore, just defeated, like a man who'd finally accepted the weight of his own cowardice. Gregory, meanwhile, stepped forward with exaggerated calm. "Detective, I don't know what lies this woman has told you, but I'm the victim of an elaborate setup. She's harassed my family, trespassed on our property. We'll get your statement," Pram interrupted coolly. "But for now, you're not free to leave. Step over to that vehicle, please." Gregory's nostrils flared, but he complied, his composure cracking as he was escorted by 2 officers toward a cruiser. Daniel stood nearby, pale and stunned, watching his father being led away. When his eyes met Linda's, he gave a small nod, a silent thank you. The tension in Linda's chest began to unwind, replaced by something sharper and heavier. Grief, long delayed but no longer suppressed. She had answers now, but the price of knowing was steep. A young officer approached with a blanket and gently guided her to a shaded bench away from the chaos. "Is there anyone we can call for you, ma'am?" he asked softly. Linda shook her head. "No, just please find her. Bring my daughter home." He nodded and walked off as the first search team disappeared down the trail. As the sun dipped low over the Everglades, casting golden light across the prairies, Linda sat still and silent, watching as years of mystery, silence, and pain began to unravel, one truth at a time. Him down with professional precision, then securing his wrists behind his back. Gregory still resisted, verbally more than physically, spitting accusations and denials, his voice rising with each sentence. "This is a setup! You can't do this! That woman is obsessed. She's been harassing my family for years." "No one's setting you up," Detective Pram replied calmly. "We followed procedure. The evidence speaks for itself. And now, so will the forensic team." Gregory turned his glare on Linda as he was led away. "You destroyed everything. You think this makes you a hero?" "I think it makes me a mother," Linda said, her voice quiet but unwavering. As Gregory was placed into the back of a cruiser, the full weight of 12 long years began to lift off Linda's chest. It didn't disappear. Nothing could undo the loss of Melissa. But for the first time since that awful day, justice was more than a word. It was in motion. Daniel stood nearby, staring at the squad car's taillights as they pulled away. His expression was unreadable, a lifetime of loyalty unraveling in minutes. "He always made it about control," he murmured. Even Brandon's wedding wasn't about love. It was about defiance. And this was his punishment. Eleanor remained seated on the bench, tears streaking her cheeks, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I didn't know. God help me, I didn't know. Linda turned to her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You didn't bury her. He did. And now we can bring her home. Detective Pram returned, this time softer in demeanor. Mrs. Carroll, I'll need you to come with us tomorrow morning. We'll have a forensic team walk you through the identification process and explain what comes next. But for tonight, you did more than most ever could. Linda nodded slowly, exhaustion beginning to take hold. I'll be there. I want to see her. I need to. The officers began clearing the area. Lights on cruisers dimmed as tourists and bystanders were ushered away. Night settled over the Everglades in hushed reverence. As Linda stood under the canopy of fading daylight, surrounded by the people who had once doubted her, one truth held her steady. Melissa had finally been found, not by luck, but by a mother who refused to let silence win. With pedigree, with wealth, someone who wouldn't dilute the bloodline or stain the family's reputation. In his words, Detective Pram said grimly, he saw your daughter not as a person, but as a threat to his control over Brandon and the future of his company. Linda's stomach twisted. She'd known Gregory hated her, but she hadn't realized how far he'd been willing to go. Otis agreed to the plan, Pram continued. He was paid to flirt with Melissa, try to drive a wedge between them. The lingerie was part of that plan, but Otis got sloppy. He used his real name, and Brandon found the gift. It sparked a confrontation, not a breakup. Melissa confessed everything, and Brandon didn't leave her. He proposed that same night. Linda wiped her eyes slowly, her voice hoarse. They married because of that. Yes, Pram nodded, and that sealed it. Gregory didn't just want Melissa gone. He wanted the problem erased. Otis says Gregory arranged everything, the tools, the location, the timeline. He ordered Otis to lure them both to the Everglades under the pretense of a honeymoon cabin. It was a lie. Brandon was ambushed. Otis admitted he didn't do it alone. There was another man, a contractor connected to Whitmore Industries, who's since disappeared. We'll be investigating that next. Linda stared at the table, struggling to breathe. So he had them both killed. His own son. Just wiped out. Detective Pram's voice softened. Brandon wasn't the target, but once he refused to cut ties with Melissa, he became collateral. Otis said Gregory gave strict orders not to leave evidence. The car was driven into a deep basin in the Everglades. The bodies separated. Melissa was buried in the limestone ridge you saw. Brandon, we haven't found him yet, but we will. Linda covered her mouth as another wave of emotion crashed through her. The room felt both too small and too cold, full of memory and loss. But why now? She asked quietly. Why was Gregory so afraid again? Why bring Otis back after all these years? Pram leaned forward. Because we found the car. That changed everything. Gregory panicked. Otis had been living quietly out of state, working small jobs. But Gregory called him back, promised money if he took the fall. Said it was the only way to end the investigation quickly. Linda sat in silence for a long moment. Then she lifted her head. I want to testify. At trial. I want the world to know what he did. You will, Pram said, and I'll make sure your voice is heard. For you and for Melissa. As he stood and escorted her from the room, the station hummed with activity, but Linda felt strangely calm now. For the first time in 12 years, she wasn't haunted by the unknown. The truth, as dark as it was, had finally come to light, and Melissa could finally rest. Detective Pram's tone never wavered as he laid out Otis's confession. Gregory Whitmore, he said, didn't just frown on Brandon marrying beneath the family station. He hired Otis and Otis's father, Ray, to wreck the marriage before it even started. The goal was simple. pair Brandon with someone from money and status, not a girl who'd only finished high school, as Gregory allegedly sneered. Otis first tried low-level sabotage, showing up at Melissa's workplace, staging chance meetings, sending the pricey lingerie, hoping Brandon would grow suspicious and end things. But the young couple only grew closer. They eloped, and that's when Gregory's scheme took a sinister turn. He bankrolled a robbery gone wrong at a beach cottage in Dania Beach, where Melissa and Brandon spent their brief honeymoon. Ray was to remove Melissa while Brandon was out for an evening walk, leaving behind a scene that looked random. But Brandon returned early, and chaos followed. Otis admitted that Ray committed unspeakable acts after Melissa's life was taken. Brandon burst in, tried to protect his wife, and was silenced because he'd witnessed everything. Gregory's resources handled the rest. Private trucks moved the couple, professionals scrubbed the cottage, and the new Ford Thunderbird was driven deep into the Everglades, where a boat pushed it into water so dark he assumed the current would carry it away forever. With no victims, no vehicle, and not a single security camera in 1985, detectives back then assumed the newlyweds had simply vanished together. Gregory even placed Brandon's ashes in our family memorial under Otis Dunhale's name, Eleanor whispered, stunned when the latest search team returned. An urn hidden away from the main Whitmore gallery confirmed it. Their son had been right there all along. Otis told investigators he and Ray kept quiet because Gregory promised protection, and because turning on him meant they'd all be exposed. But when the Thunderbird resurfaced 12 years later, Gregory panicked. He hauled Otis back to Florida, dangled an offshore payment, and ordered him to take the fall. Now Ray had been booked, Otis was cooperating, and Gregory, once so controlled, could only glare through the booking room glass while lawyers scrambled. In a quiet interview room, Linda Carroll gave her formal statement, tears coming only when Detective Pram offered simple kindness. For 12 years she'd wrestled with horrible possibilities that her daughter had left or was suffering somewhere, calling out for help. Now she finally knew the truth, terrible but certain. Waiting alone later, she let the years wash over her. Empty birthdays, silent holidays, every lonely moment spent defending Melissa's name while Gregory whispered that she wasn't good enough. Yet Melissa had loved and been loved to the very end. Brandon chose her over privilege and fought for her when it mattered most. The grief would stay. Linda knew that, but the uncertainty was gone. Soon she could give Melissa a proper resting place, bring flowers, speak to her without doubt. And the man who tried to erase her daughter's worth would answer for every decision that led them here.